Welcome to the Trap House Podcast. Thanks for joining us. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe on all social media platforms. And now a quick word about our sponsors. We have Duke Traps with us. Check out duketraps.com. They manufacture over 40 different models of cage traps, coil and long springs, and body gripping style traps, as well as one of my personal favorites, the powder coated dog proofs. Check out duketraps.com. Need a place to sell your fur? Check out Groenwald Fur and Wool Company. Over 50 years in the fur business, the largest and most experienced direct receiver of wild fur in the world. Check out their website, gfwco.com. Top Lot Stretcher Company. They have all the fur processing tools you need to get the job done in the fur shed. From push pins to wooden stretchers, they got you covered. Check out toplotstretcherco.com. J3 Outdoors. They make American trapping products designed for maximum trapline efficiency, with products like the Hags Bracket and Spring Clip, as well as the Universal Lock and Beaver Rod ends. Get the tools you need to get the job done. Find out more at j3o.com. And there's only one true way to start out the day on the trapline, and that's with a hot cup of coffee from Trapline Coffee. They have great tasting blends to choose from, as well as chocolates. Head over to traplinecoffee.com for more. And we'd like to welcome the newest sponsor to the team, No BS Lures. Don't let the name fool you. There's more than just bait and lure. This company offers trapline tools and hardware, fur handling supplies, and the No BS traps. Check out nobslures.com. And last but not least, Hoosier Trapper Supply, home of the Top Dog Predator Bait, Jet Fuel Predator Lure. We offer a complete line of trapping baits and lures, deer scent, trapline tools and hardware, fur processing tools, and special package offers. Head over to HoosierTrapperSupply.com. All right, welcome back to another Trap House podcast. Season's right around the corner, so I know a lot of people are getting fired up. But today we're going to have Cameron Kelsey with us. He's the coordinator for the National Trappers Foundation. So, we just got done brief chatting before this started rolling. So, nice to meet you again. I'll say that. But
Yeah.
all the way from Rhode Island, right?
Yep. That's where I currently reside.
Cool. Yeah, like you've seen the podcast before, so we always start with kind of like the upbringing. Like, how did you get involved in the outdoor world and trapping to begin with? I guess we should probably start there.
Well, so yeah, I was born and raised in Minnesota, southern Minnesota, and outdoors just kind of came naturally, right? I think I was probably 3 years old or something when my dad first took me fishing. It was just a big outdoor area. I grew up in the country, and I think I was like, well, I don't know, I was probably 7, 8 years old, and I know my dad would take me out trapping pocket gophers. There was a real pocket gopher problem around there. Well, anyway, that was kind of my first exposure to trapping. But he had told me stories about trapping muskrats when he was younger and stuff. And so anyway, one time he made mention of I think we were ordering something from a fishing catalog or something, and so he's like, "Hey, there's a trapping book in here. Why don't I order it for you if you'd like?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." I'm like all of 11 years old or something. I was like, "Oh, that sounds fun." Pre-internet, of course, so you're just looking for something to read and whatever. Um, but but anyway, it was a Trapper's Companion, I think one of those old A.R. Harding books or whatever that came
Right.
in. But I read that thing cover to cover. And my dad, he introduced me to a couple of trappers in the area and such. And so and he went out to the shed one day and handed me 6 rusty old 1.5 long springs that he had used many, many years ago, and it just kind of took off from there. So I was 12 when I ran my first fur line, I guess in 1988. Wasn't much of one. I was pretty young, but um, and that was an interesting time, right? The fur prices had come way down. So, but there was still a number of guys trapping back there. Minnesota's a pretty good trapping state, really. I mean, there's a lot of mink, a lot of rats, a lot of coon around, and you get out in the rural areas there and stuff, and so guys could a lot of those guys were just trapping right of ways along the bridges and stuff, and so that's how they were making pretty good catches. But I was able to kind of learn from those guys, and of course it was tough sledding at first, but as time went on and I learned, right, I got talking to guys, and every once in a while I'd run into one of those long liners at a bridge, and they usually wouldn't talk much, but they were in a hurry. But still, you learn from those guys, and so yeah, that's how I got started. And yeah, it just kind of took off from there. Every year I got a little bit better. I don't know, I think I was 13 or 14, somewhere in there when a guy first took me coon hunting, and that was a whole nother addiction that I got into that. And I don't know how I slept actually between chasing dogs at night and trapping and hunting and doing all those kind of things. I guess that was a good upbringing, you know.
Yeah. That was kind of back in the day where, well, of course, you were much younger. And not that you're not young now, but you were much younger and it was easier to burn the candle at both ends, you know. So,
Oh
um,
yeah.
but that was, of course, that was really after the fur boom, but during the fur boom, guys trap during the day and or mornings and at least, and some would run dogs in the evening or, so yeah, that was a crazy.
It's a good state for it too.
Oh yeah, Minnesota is definitely a trapping state. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah, good association and stuff. A lot of good trappers came out of there, or were from that area. I grew up not terribly far from like Gerald Schmidt, um, Mark Stacks out of North Mankato. So I don't know, it's probably 20, 30 minutes from Mankato is where I probably about 30 minutes, I guess. But he was out of there. Ron Hauser, his brother Dennis Hauser, those guys were out of that North Mankato area. Um, and then there's a lot of other really good guys there that no one's ever heard of, but they were just hard trappers and they never, talked a lot about it. But a group of guys that were commercial fishermen, fish rough fish in some of the lakes up there. And so those guys would take to mink trapping in the fall and stuff. So, and then a lot of guys, farmers and stuff would just, kind of run hobby lines and stuff. Yeah, a lot of trappers, a lot of hunters too, right? A lot of pheasant hunters and stuff there too.
so did you know Gerald and Mark Steck back then, or Ron
Not
House?
as a not as a kid, I didn't know Ron. So not as a kid, I didn't know those guys. I came to meet them later in life. I did. So Ron's brother Dennis, though, was a student teacher at my high school in Bedelia High School there in Bedelia, Minnesota. And so, oddly enough, I think it was shop or like industrial arts. He was like a student teacher there, and he came in and introduced himself, and he said something about, oh, I've done a lot of trapping these years. I was like, wow, okay, I gotta talk more to this guy. So I got to know him. He actually took me out a little bit and a couple of the other kids from school there, and kind of took us. I mean, it wasn't on his trap line, but he took us out in the fields and the streams and stuff. And he actually taught me a bunch, right, in the amount of time, just a few hours, whatever, here and there that he spent with me. Showed me really kind of how to dig a pocket set good and things like that. That it was kind of tough to pick up from books and stuff back then. And of course, there wasn't any YouTube or anything like that. So spending a little bit of time with a guy like that was really valuable.
So were you primarily a water trapper, or did you do some land trapping too, or?
I did a little bit of everything. Um, I did. I wasn't the greatest canine trapper when I was a kid. I'm probably still not very good at it, but I do remember catching my first fox. That was a big deal, right?
Mhm.
For me to catch a fox, catch a red fox. I still remember pulling up, the sun hitting it early in the morning, and I about fainted. There's a red fox sitting over there in my trap. you know, so I did get lucky there. Um, I I've always though I don't know. I've always really enjoyed muskrats and like beaver trap. I didn't do much beaver trap when I was in high school. I kind of migrated that later in life, but there's just something about going down to a creek or a slough and seeing some muskrat houses or a run or coming down to a river or something and seeing some beaver chewings. I don't know. That just excites me. And so I've always really enjoyed the water side of it. But I've trapped plenty of coon, trapped coyotes. I've some states I've been in, I've trapped bobcats before. So
Mhm.
I've done a little bit of everything.
So back in your earlier years, in when you're in Minnesota, how did you market your fur back? Because that was like after the things that really declined, and
Yep.
it was more difficult to find a buyer.
So probably 20 minutes or so from home there was a pretty good sized fur buyer, W&R Furs in Fairmont, Minnesota. And that's where everything I caught in my high school years went down there. I say down there to that buyer. And that was that's kind of a story in and of itself, that place. I mean, I can remember going in there, and that building they had cardboard on the floors, and there'd be just piles of coon and there'd be a pile of mink and rats, and I have no idea how they ever got all that skin, because even in the 88, 89, 90, early 90s, whatever, they were sending buyers out on the road. I think they were buying down in Iowa and stuff, and so they were coming in with piles of well, it looked to me like a lot of people were selling on the carcass there.
Right.
I mean, it's just fur everywhere in there, and there'd be guys in there skinning, and the place had quite a smell to it, right? With all the critters in there, and guys would be in there smoking and everything else. And I mean, you'd come out and my parents could always, they're like, "Oh man, need to hose you off after you come out of that place or something."
Yeah.
But it's quite a place. And I remember Warren Anderson was a guy that owned the place. In fact, it's funny. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, he finally sold the business or got out of fur buying. It's closed up, but it was only 4 or 5 years ago he got out. But I remember Warren was a buyer there, and I'd come in there and he'd have a wad of cash in his pants. He'd pull it out. I'd have a little bit of whatever, and he'd throw them in piles and blow in it. Look at it like, oh, this is this, and like I said, he'd always make the little piles, and well, this pile's this, and this pile of coon is that, and this one over here is all springy looking or whatever. I'll give you $1 for that, but he would always make his little piles and go from there.
Right.
And so yeah, I'll always remember that place as quite a unique place, and I would meet guys in there, and I always like to spend a little extra time hanging out in there because I just figured I could learn something from the guys that came in, and I'd see these guys come in with a truckload of fur, and I'm like, oh man, how do these guys do it?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was quite a place. It's sad because there's not a lot of those country fur buyers left anymore.
There aren't, and that is, yeah, it's very sad because I was buying during those years. I quit buying in 1991, but it was like a kind of a social hub, for people that were in the trapping or hunting. And they most, during in the late 80s that started kind of subsiding, but there used to be buyers like in every county. I mean, it was not difficult to find a buyer, and guys would run around and try to get the best price. And yeah, thinking back on it, it was a crazy time to think that it was like that. And we may or may not ever see that again. Probably not, so
Yeah.
But
There's still a handful of buyers in Minnesota that I see advertising and such. Is there much for buyers in Indiana anymore?
we still have a few.
You do, okay.
But I mean, our fur, we've got some things that are pretty good quality, but overall, I mean, our raccoons are okay. It's not as good as yours. Our muskrats are good. Our mink are okay. Our red foxes are small, but they're cherry red. So, I mean, our coyotes are terrible, like all the eastern coyotes, but so it's just
One for every 100.
yeah, so obviously the farther north you go, normally the better the quality of the fur. Somebody, these guys in the South that used to have fur buyers, that's a thing of the past. I mean, that fur down there is tough, so to sell, market, even their bobcats are $20-$30 or whatever. So
Yeah, I was going to say the cats down in the South I mean, sure, you hear about the guys in Wyoming and Nevada that are getting, insane prices for bobcats. Not all bobcats are created equal, and a bobcat coming out of Georgia or Alabama is not like a bobcat out of the high desert of Nevada. I'll say that.
Right.
Like two different animals when you put them side by side. Then people can realize, like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Right. Indiana, this will be our first year for a bobcat season here in Indiana, and probably people are tired of us talking about it, but we're excited.
Yeah.
And we have a very conservative quota of 250 for the legal counties, which I don't think it's going to take them very long to fill that. And I have a feeling the vast majority of those will be tanned at minimum, or maybe taxidermy mounted. And in the scheme of things, probably not that many of them are actually going to be sold, certainly the first couple of years. But, it's probably, here in Indiana, it's probably only a $40 to maybe $60 cat. Generally, there might be some 80s, but it's just not a great bobcat. So, but,
Yeah, it's insane how much that animal fluctuates as far as quality is concerned. Again, like I said, you talk those high desert cats of the West, and it is really something, the amount of money they get. Those are some beautiful animals that come out of there.
It doesn't even look like the same species as here. It's crazy that you can have a bobcat that's worth $500 to $1,000, and here they're worth, if you're fortunate, 75. So
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. I guess the one thing I'll say though about the cats in the South, kind of what I've seen is they do have a decent population of them with not a lot of trappers. So I guess if you're out there and you have the time and the land to do it, you can probably make a decent catch of them.
Mhm.
But again, like you said, they might be 25 or $30 bobcats.
Right, right.
And I think a lot of guys in the South nowadays are trapping beaver and otter too, which, the otter market's not what it was
No,
early 2000s or whatever when there was 100 and some dollar otter coming out of the South. I mean,
right. And I think, with the beaver and otter, beaver particularly, a lot of some places will pay, for
yeah.
trappers to catch them because they're just so out of control in terms of numbers and flooding roads or whatever. But yeah, that's the
Some of
trap.
the some of
Yeah,
the timber companies down there will pay them.
right, right. And some farmers and if you are a hardworking trapper and you're willing to work the angles, I think you can stay pretty busy. There's not very many of them out there, but they definitely have a skill set that a lot of people don't have, or a willingness to work that hard too. I mean, that's year round also, a lot of that control work on beavers, et cetera, is 12 months of the year, or well, a lot of big part of the year, and they can do something else during the winter or trap something that's more valuable. But so
A lot of guys though, if you've never trapped down south, and I did when I was stationed in Georgia, um, it's a different world down there.
mhm.
And you want to get out there, and if you're doing control work and you're down in the deep south, I mean, you're probably standing out there in 100, 98-degree weather and, in July and 100, 100 degrees, whatever it is, with sweat pouring off you. And, there's alligators and you got to watch out for the cottonmouths and everything else that are around there. They like to lay up on those beaver dams and stuff down there. So
Right,
it's a lot different than fur trapping in New England in the dead of winter or something. It's a different ball game down
right, right. Yeah, you got to be a special kind of person
Yeah.
to do that.
Well, heck, just I've never done the nuisance stuff. Well, at least outside of season. But there was a couple of years ago, had an issue with a beaver around the corner. Guy talked me into helping him out. He's like, I'll give you a cut of it or whatever. And I got there and started trampling through. Part of the summer, the brush was just so thick. Just to get to the thing was the task with the gear. And I was like, I don't like this. This is not for me. I like winter trapping.
Well, that's why I always say kind of hats off to those nuisance guys. That's not an easy line of work. I mean, it's one thing fur trapping, right? As we all know, you come in and you catch what you catch, right? I mean, whatever. And you get that kind of spook coyote or even beaver or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'll just leave that for seed, whatever. Those nuisance guys, I mean, they're paying you to catch what's there.
Right.
And so that's hats off to those guys. That's not an easy line of work. And then you're dealing with customers, and customers want animals trapped sooner rather than later, and they don't want to hear about inclement weather that maybe stop the animals from moving or whatever. They want results right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say I did catch that beaver, just to be clear.
Oh, good.
I come out there sweating, pricked with every thorn you can think of, but we got it.
So Cameron, did you join the military outside of high school or college or?
No, it was right out of high school. So it was like I graduated high school, and a week later, almost to the T, I was in boot camp. So I wasted no time. Kind of a funny story. I guess as a kid, I had dreams of being a big long line trapper, but I kind of realized, well, I don't know. I think my dad at one point said, you should pay attention to some of the trucks those hardcore trappers are driving. Some of them look pretty rough. He's like, he goes, that maybe tells you a little something. And so I was like, yeah, I should probably maybe, start getting a little older, you look for something else. And so I remember I was like, well, I don't really feel like going to college. But I was like, I got to do something with my life, and that was the other thing. Like all my friends were like sweating, like really getting nervous about college and all these applications. And so I got this idea of joining the military. I was like, this sounds easy enough. I'll just go down to a recruiter, sign up. I don't have to worry about all this college stuff. My friends are worrying about. This will be easy. So I went and saw a Navy recruiter and started talking to him. And then kind of a curveball comes into play. Interesting story. So I was thinking the Navy, right? And don't even ask me how I thought. Like, I never thought about the Navy as a kid. It was just one of those ideas where like you could go see. I think I heard one of those commercials or something about seeing the world, and I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I guess the Navy will do that. And but I remember watching again. I'm in high school, and so I'm thinking military. I remember seeing the movie Few Good Men back then, and like I remember watching that, and I'm thinking, man, that looks really cool doing the Marine Corps thing. What could be cooler than that? I know how to shoot. I can run through the woods and carry a rifle. And so then I went and saw a Marine recruiter, and so I'm kind of doing the parallel path between the two of them, right? But my heart's kind of leaning towards the Marines, and I was going to do infantry and shoot guns and all that kind of fun stuff. And I remember I got to the point where I was trying to figure out which way to go. And I started getting a little bit kind of nervous and sweating it a little bit. And then I'm sitting there, and one day I'm like, you know what? No, I'm doing this so I can stay stress free. I'm going to pick a branch. And I said to myself, it was like a Friday afternoon. I said, you know what? Whatever recruiter calls me next, I'm going that way. Now, I thought to myself as I said that, I'm sure the Marines will be the one that call me next, but whatever. We'll let this play out. This is on like a Friday, and like on a Monday or Tuesday, right? It wasn't long after. Phone rings. Of course, this is before cell phones, right? So landline at the house rings. My mom's like, "Oh, here it's for you. I think it's a recruiter." Oh, so I had visions of like the Marine Corps dress blues in my mind as I'm lifting the phone to my ear, and I still remember, hello, and as soon as I heard it, it was hi, this is OS2 Rasmussen from the Navy office. You still want to join the Navy? And I was like, yeah. It's like it was one of those moments where it was like, wasn't expecting this one, So he's like, oh, great. Well, I'll come by and get you, blah blah blah, and I take you and get the physical done. And I'm just sitting there on the phone, like, yeah, okay. And then finally, he hangs up the phone. And my mom's like, oh, who was that? Was that a recruiter? And I was like, I'm joining the Navy, Mom. Like, that was kind of all I could say. So it's funny. I tell that story kind of with a laugh because it's funny how things work out, right? And so that got right. One thing leads to another. Next thing you know, obviously I'm in the Navy, which was a good path for me. I do remember the whole thing was I did this. Well, the other thing was, right, I didn't want to go to college, and like mom and dad wanted me to, but at 18, I'm smarter than my parents, of course. So I'm going to go, live life and do my own things. And I remember like I'm a week or two into boot camp getting screamed at, and I'm sitting there thinking, what am I, man, college would be nice right about now. So, but yeah, I stuck with it, and life went on, and it took off from there.
Yeah. So how many years were you in the Navy then?
30 years.
30 years.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I ended up doing 30.
We appreciate your service for sure. And
thanks.
That's 30 is a long time. That's pretty dedicated. So
it's funny you say that because I talk to people about it, and I had a friend say this to me recently. He said, put it to you like this. He goes, how many people out there stay with the same company for 30 years anymore?
Exactly.
Not many.
Yeah.
I remember being in college, and that this statistic could be totally different now, but I remember at the time someone told me that it was within a person's career path, they'll change their career to totally something different 3 different times in their life span. 1 minute you're a chef, next minute you're working on a fire truck or something that's totally unrelated. I don't know what that number is now, or I'm sure it's changed, but yeah, 30 years in one spot, that says something.
Yeah.
See, Troy, I'm 20 years over here at Hoosier Trapper, right? What is it?
I think so.
That's about that.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing I'll say about the military, though, I guess it does help is every few years you are changing duty stations, and sometimes oftentimes in my career that involved a move, like packing up and moving across country or overseas or whatever. So it is kind of neat that every 3-4 years you are seeing something new, a new command, new people. We have a joke in the military, at least in the Navy, it's probably throughout the other branches, is if you don't like where you're stationed, just give it 6 months. It's going to be a whole new cast of characters around you because people come and go. That can be good or bad. Because sometimes you get folks you really like working for, or as I got senior, folks that I like that were working for me. And then as you know, time goes on, those folks are going to leave and new people are going to come in. So it's got its ups and downs. Um, a number of my years in the Navy, quite a few of my years when I was enlisted were submarines on submarines. So, I mean, you know, I guess that's not for everyone, but I enjoyed it. It never, didn't bother me being underwater or anything like that. So, a lot of people say they would never do that, but I don't know. It seemed fine to me. So,
Yeah. I'm kind of claustrophobic, so it would probably bother me, but I'm glad that you had enjoyed it and it didn't bother you. So
Speaking of that topic, I got to throw this out there. Jake, that works here, Charlie's son. People listening know about Jake. Well, we haven't talked too much. He just got done building this whole boat from scratch. Took him like 3 years, and it's like legit really nice. And I walk into his room the other day. He's looking up plans to build a submarine. I'm like, what does this kid do? He's not a kid anymore, but to me, my brother-in-law, younger brother-in-law, but just like, man, he's on to something. Apparently, he's not afraid to go that deep underwater.
no, no, it's funny. I was talking recently with a guy he was a pilot, right? So he'd done pilot stuff for obviously years, right? Enjoyed flying, said he really liked that, said he did a bunch of skydiving over the years, and he was into whitewater rafting and whatever. Sound like an adrenaline junkie, for lack of better words, right? Nothing wrong with that. And so he's telling me about all this kind of stuff, and then he goes, what did you do? What did you do in the Navy? And so I said, well, I said, I said I was a cook, and I said a lot of those years were on a submarine. And he's like, what? I mean, this guy's eyes got me. He's like, no way would I ever do that. What in the world is wrong with you? So I was like, okay, I guess it's to each their own. But
yeah. When I was younger, there was a brief stint where I thought maybe Air Force or something like that. Just 'cause my last name's Jet, so it just made sense, but never went that way.
So you were a cook all these years in the Navy?
Yeah. Yep. So I was when I was enlisted, right? I was the cook, and then I as time went on, right, as I got senior in my career, I made it all the way up to E9, which is as high as an enlisted person can go. And then I took a commission as a chief warrant officer, and then in that path, I became a food service officer. So then the scope broadens, and food service officers in the military, at least the senior ones like myself, were put in charge of larger operations. And so I was a food service officer on an aircraft carrier, ran a large shore station, did a galley. I also did, I should say, large shore station galley, decent sized one. And then I was an instructor, right? So my last about 4 years or so in the Navy, I taught. And so I taught food service to new supply officers. And I say food service, a lot of that I was teaching them was the records and the accountability, because, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, but food service, military wise at least, and I guess in the private sector too, but there's a lot of accounting, a lot of paperwork that goes into it, a ton of it. And so as I got senior, I mean, obviously I'm really getting into the books at that point, and I say books, right, the bookkeeping side of it and stuff. So I was teaching that to folks that were coming in, teaching them about auditing and stuff on sanitation and stuff that they would need to know to kind of oversee an operation, if you will. So, so 30 years I was doing it in one capacity or another, right? Whether it was the cooking itself or managing operations and instructing and things like that. So yeah,
a big aircraft carrier. That's quite a logistical. I mean, that's a lot of people, and I'm assuming you're rotating. Available room and all that. So
yeah, yes, it is. And I talked to having seen food service from submarine small all the way up to an aircraft carrier. People would talk to me about the differences, and I'm like, the accounting, the basic rules of sanitation, that's all the same. Right. It's just the scope and the level at which you're doing it at. And the big decks, I say big decks, your aircraft carriers and your large amphibious ships, they've got their challenges. A lot of it being number of people you're feeding and the number of people that you're managing to get those people fed. When you go to something really small like a submarine, your challenges there can be limited amount of people that you've got to work with to feed a crew, and then small conditions. And one of the biggest challenges on a submarine is packing enough food into that thing. If you're trying to carry 90 to 120 plus days of food, you're talking food stashed in all kinds of places, and something that the Navy's gone to now that I think is smart. We weren't doing this a few years ago, but they've started doing freeze dried. So they're getting like freeze dried chicken and stuff. And I first heard about it and I was like, but I've tried it. It's actually a good product, right? And so like the submarines can carry a bunch of that's going to be able to extend the amount of time they can stay at sea. Because you take a nuclear powered submarine, it's really only limiting factor is how much food it can carry. I mean, it's not like those things are having to get gas every other day or something. So they can stay out there for a long period of time, but it's typically been limited by the amount of food they can carry.
Okay. So what would be the longest time that you would stay out on a submarine?
Well, that varies. I've deployed for like 6 months, right? But that would involve some ports. You'd pull into ports and stuff overseas. But I have, let's see, longest I think straight underway. I did like 88 days, I think. And I know guys have done longer, and we've seen more the last few years with things getting kind of stuff going on, let's just say, overseas and such. I know guys that stretch out well north of 100 days that they've spent. And when you start doing long periods of time like that, I mean, I did several times where I was 6, 7, 8 weeks out there straight. You just get into a routine and stay busy is what I always told people. I tried to stay as busy as I could and make the time go by. You stay busy, you're working, before you know it, it's time to get some sleep, and then you're right back at it, and there's drills going on, and you're standing watch, and especially on a submarine, we drill a lot because casualties are a big deal, right? Whether it's a fire, flooding, things. I mean, there's all kinds of things you've got to train for, because I mean, at the end of the day, it is a dangerous environment. You're not going to run anywhere. You're not, your fire happens, you got to put it out. You got to put it out quick.
Right.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, and I'm assuming the kitchen is obviously a fire hazard.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It is, yeah. And that's just it, right? You deal something like a submarine, you're dealing with obviously you got everything you've got in, like you mentioned in the galley kitchen, we call them galleys in the Navy, but you've got that stuff. But you got to think about all the pressurized hydraulic systems that you've got, the weapon systems, Of course, there's a nuclear reactor that's on. I mean, there's all kinds of things down there that you've just, I guess to the outsider, they don't think about it. But when you're out there and you realize just how many systems there are and how dangerous that stuff can be if you're not paying attention. Which is why you get a lot of, it doesn't matter what your job is on a submarine. Everybody gets trained in all the systems. And there's a lot of training that is involved. And to finally qualify in submarines, it typically takes you about 9-10 months, and it's pretty intense qualification, but you got to finish it to stay in submarines, and to qualify submarines essentially means you know the basic systems throughout the boat, and you can as we like to say, right, you can be safe. We can I can trust, if you're qualified in submarines, I can trust you when I go to the rack and go to sleep. I know if something happens, I can trust you or whoever else in this crew to take care of it. So
Interesting.
Yeah. I went to college. Well, let's talk about the National Trappers Foundation. I'm sure some of the listeners is this a trapping show?
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
You got to forgive me.
That was very interesting, Cameron.
Yeah, it's great.
I will say before we segue into something else, 2 things about me. I can talk, as you probably have already figured out. You get me started and I can talk, so look out. And secondly, when you do a long period of time in a job, you develop a lot of stories. So yeah, I've got plenty of. So, the National Trappers Foundation. It's interesting enough.
Hold on. I do want to ask you a question. Let's back up. So, how many people that you originally enlisted with stayed in for that number of years, or did they all leave after 3 or 4 or whatever the time?
Of the guys I went to boot camp with, I think my division was 80-ish people. I don't remember, something like that, 70, 80 people. I don't know if any of them stayed there as long as I did. Because a lot of guys come in, they just do 3, 4, 4 years enlistment or whatever, 4-year enlistment, which is what all I was going to do. Believe me, I was just going to do 4 years and go. My joke was I joined so I could figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Apparently that took a long time because 30 years later I'm still there. But, but
Still
no,
figuring.
I don't. Very, very few. My little tiny high school, Medelia High School, like 50 kids is my graduating class. I went into the Navy, and there was another guy that went into the Marine Corps. And to be honest, I kind of thought he was more the career guy. He'd been talking about the Marines for a lot of years and such. And so I kind of remember thinking like, oh, he's probably going to be the guy that's going to do 20 or 30 years and retire, and I'll be the guy that just does his 4 years. Because again, that's all I was going to do and get out. And obviously the opposite. He did 4 years in the Marine Corps, got out, and whatever. I mean, he got out and wanted to pursue other things, and I was the one that stuck around. I don't know a lot of guys. Well, I know some that hang around 30. If you can make it to 20 in the military, you can retire at 20 years and draw a pension. The pension goes up every year after that you serve. So if you do 21 years, 22, whatever, right, the pension's going to increase all the way up to like 30 years. So I ended up doing the full 30. And honestly, because I like doing it, that's really what it was. People ask me all the time, why'd you hang around? And you could have retired at 20 and maybe pursued a different job and had that pension. I tell people, I'm like, because I liked it. Money isn't everything. And I really do believe that, right? I think some of the happiest people I know are the people that they maybe don't have a lot of cash in the bank or whatever, but they're happy doing what they do. And so, yeah, I just enjoyed it. I've got a good pension. I mean, it's taking care of my family and such. It's sent me around the world. When I was in Hawaii a number of years ago, I met my wife, who was born and raised in Hawaii. So I met her out there, and my daughter's 12, and so it's interesting all the moves, right? My wife and I've talked about this. It's I can say I'm from Minnesota, right? That is where I'm from, and my wife can say she's from Hawaii, but it's tough for our daughter because she's moved around a bunch.
Right.
So she was born in Georgia and lived there till she was 10 or 11 months old, and then kind of bounced around since then. But I will say, and she's 12 now. But if you ask her, if I was to ask her where are you from, she'll say, well, Georgia. That's where she was born. So
Sure.
so yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic, I guess.
Yeah, that is. So you're in Rhode Island now.
Yes, after bouncing all over the place, as I mentioned, yeah, Rhode Island. So last few years in Rhode Island, live right on the Connecticut border. So I trap both Rhode Island and Connecticut because I'm literally like a mile away from the Connecticut line. And these states here are tiny, by the way, which
Right.
if you travel around the Northeast at all, I mean, Rhode Island's like the size of a couple of counties in, Minnesota or South Dakota or something. So, but yeah, so in Rhode Island, and I have had a chance to trap a number of different states, right, where I lived and such. If I was able to trap there, I could. Some states, Hawaii, California, places like that, I wasn't trapping. But yeah, in Rhode Island here, just retired this spring from the Navy, and you were talking about the National Trappers Foundation. It's interesting. So I was sitting there, I guess it was this past winter, thumbing through the American Trapper magazine, and I kind of passed an ad or whatever, a little thing in there about the National Trappers Foundation is looking for blah, blah, blah. And I was like, whatever, I just kind of passed by, and I was like, wait, what? I flipped a couple of pages back, and I was like, read through it, and I was like, huh, I might have time. And I was like, yeah, whatever, but I kept going back to that page. And so finally, I talked to my wife, and she's like, yeah, why don't I think she's like, good, give this man something to do when he retires so he's not driving me nuts. So anyway, so yeah, so I ended up sending in an application, etc., and interviewed and took the position as a development coordinator for him. And really, the National Trappers Foundation was Fur Bearers Unlimited for a number of years. I think 1988 is when it started, all the way up until the rebrand came in, if you will, a couple of years ago. Mission's still the same: education, right? Working with organizations and providing grants and stuff for research and such. Mission's really kind of the same, just been a rebranding effort. And so one of the things that I've done since I started working there is trying to just get out and get the word out. And you know what? That can be as simple, in my opinion, at least. A lot of it is grassroots type stuff, as simple as going to a convention, sitting at a table, and letting people come by and start talking. Right. And so I've made a real effort to get out. I obviously go to the big ones, right? I was at the national down in Virginia and the Western out in Nevada this year, but I'm doing some smaller ones. I mean, up here in the Northeast, for example, these states are so small, you can hit a bunch of them within a few hours of home. In fact, this upcoming weekend, I'll be up in Vermont. I'm going up to Northern Vermont to their Trappers Association. I'm going to do a National Trappers Foundation table. Excuse me. And I say up in Vermont, it is way up there. It's like 20 miles from the Canadian border or something. Okay. So I'll be way up there this weekend. But again, I'm going to have a table, shaking hands, getting, handing stuff out, material out, talking to people, probably do a little raffle, or I will do a little raffle while I'm up there. But, I was in New Hampshire earlier, a few weeks ago at their convention. I've got New Jersey coming up. I'll be at Connecticut, a number of these states, as I mentioned. This past weekend, I was up in Massachusetts, and it's interesting, right? If you know anything about Massachusetts, 96, they lost foothold traps, right, and really everything but cages. But they've got it's not a large association, but they've got a good group of dedicated folks that are there trying to keep trapping alive in Massachusetts. And so I was up there at their annual meeting, and I talked about the National Trappers Foundation. One of the things I told them too was, I said, hats off to everybody in this room, because you're not trapping in an easy state. You've got all kinds of laws that are restricting you to cages, etc. And the fact that you're keeping it alive and staying with it, I said, I think that's a true testament to those folks that were there. So, but yeah, a lot of it has just been getting out and talking to people. A lot of people still think of it as FBU, so I'm talking to them about the rebrand and the changing around, etc. And like I said, just trying to get the word out, and so it's been fun, right? Getting out to the conventions and getting to meet people is always fun. I know you guys know all about that because you hit your share of them, so I know you know what it's like dealing with people.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely we don't hit a lot of them like some of the supply dealers do. We'll do the NTA and we'll do the FTA National, and then we'll do
ones that we have here in Indiana.
Yeah, the Indiana State. I am going to go to Illinois, but that's about it. We don't just beat the road. It's just time. I mean, it takes a lot of time to do that. So, but yeah, certainly enjoy it. And of course, we're looking forward to the NTA being here in Indiana next July. So,
yeah, it's interesting. I like. I'm setting up not much of a booth, right? Just putting tablecloth and some runners down and pamphlets and a few things. And that alone can get kind of tiring, right? Setting that up and breaking it down. I can only imagine the guys that show up with a trailer full of material, and they've got all the lures placed out and traps hanging and displays. I mean, that's got to get old, setting that up every weekend, tearing it down, and then getting on the road and going to a convention the next weekend.
Yeah. This year, with the NTA and the FTA being so close together, basically, that one was pretty tough. From Virginia to Iowa, northwestern Iowa, of all things. That was kind of a very hectic couple weeks. And of course, things are still going on here. So when you get back, then you're just trying to play catch up from being gone and all of that too. So, but yeah, it's part of it. And we do really enjoy it. Don't get us wrong. I mean, it's really good to see everybody. Maybe you may only see some of those people once a year or whatever. So it's definitely nice to do that. So
I think it's really neat how many people, or it seems like anyway, make the nationals, whether it's the NTA or the FTA, they make that into like a family vacation every year.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Last year when of course, the East Coast, I mean, there's lots of vacation possibilities out there. But last year when it was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota,
Yep.
I don't know how many families or people we talked to that were literally using that as their starting point for like a Western loop to Yellowstone or whatever, or they had just done it and they hit the NT on the way back, you know.
Yep.
So um,
We bounced out for a day in the Badlands.
we had to take a quick loop to the Badlands and
Oh, speaking of which, look at that.
Yeah.
We're playing that.
so but yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people that um use that for their vacation and just pencil that in every year. That's just what they're going to do, you know. So but
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the Badlands. That is a pretty cool trip out in South Dakota, is to go out through the Badlands and up through the Black Hills and stuff. There's a lot of really neat things to see out there.
right, there
Yeah.
are.
Hey, while we're talking about conventions, though, we need to plug. We got our rendezvous that we host here for Tickets for America Chapter 7B here at Hoosier Trapper Supply. While you're watching, it'll be next weekend. So Friday the 26th and 27th. That's 2 days. We're celebrating basically 50 years of the rendezvous
Wow.
itself. So it's gonna be a big one.
Yeah, it kind of there. I mean, in full disclosure, there were a few years that it did go dormant. That the association was still alive on paper essentially, but they weren't really holding regular meetings so much. And we kind of revived it, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. So, but yeah, it's alive and well. It's been going good. So then the Indiana State Trappers Association will be today, the day this is released, and then tomorrow, Saturday. So, anyways, yeah.
I feel like, and I don't know, I haven't been, but just listening to your podcast and such, I feel like you the 7B rendezvous. I feel like that's growing. Has it not? Like, it used to be one day, right? Or has it always been 2 days?
It's always been one. This is the first year that we've well, it's more like a day and a half. Our first demo starts at 3 o'clock on Friday. But because of, like we were saying, like the 50-year thing and just kind of extending, we have so many people that travel from out of state. And we want to make it worth their time and trip to come, just to show up for the day and then turn around and leave again. It's not very, so it kind of extends things and we can add more demos and
Right.
eat more food,
Right.
have more music,
Right.
all that stuff. So
Right. So as far as the attendance, I mean, it's a fairly constant attendance. There is definitely, I don't know what it is. There's always this core group that's always here, and then you've got this other group that just comes in and out. They may not come every year, or they don't trap for a few years, and then they'll come back around or whatever. But we always maintain a really good attendance. And I do certainly like to see new people. Obviously, we're the interest is there. We're getting our message to people that maybe not necessarily had it before. Importance of all this. Our Indiana fur bearer biologist is always here, and the DNR is represented. So yeah, we make. I hope and we try to put a really good light on all of this. So trapping is as portrayed as possible, as positively as possible. So, anyways,
Yeah.
it's which I think is incredibly important, particularly in the environment that we're in. With, like I said, we got a bobcat season this year, but it's been a challenge to get that. So, but we do have it.
Yeah, and I think you talk about education and such, and educating the public. National Trappers Foundation, all about that, right? Obviously, the FTA, NTA, right? There's a lot of organizations doing good things there. I think it's interesting interacting with a lot of people that I have. I do think, and I got to be careful how I say this because I don't want to say it the wrong way. I don't know. Okay, here's where I'm trying to go. Animal rights organizations are still there and as prevalent as they've always been. And they've got the deep-pocketed donors that are there donating money to them. But I don't know. I wonder sometimes if they've got the youth movement that they had in the 90s and late 80s and such. Because like I said, I talked to a lot of folks, and being in the military, I was talking to and working with people from New York City and a lot of major urban areas. And when I would talk about hunting and trapping. So be amazed at how many of those people either didn't have an opinion or thought it was kind of neat.
Yeah.
And I remember years ago, when cable TV first started showing mountain men and some of these things, I was listening to a lot of these folks that were watching that and thought that stuff was really interesting. And so I think especially when you start talking to folks that are under, I don't know, 35 or whatever, 40, you start talking to them about sustainable, fur and eco-friendly, green, those kind of buzzwords, right? That people like them or not. I think that kind of matters, right, to some of the younger folks. And so, again, I don't want to say this like it's all bright skies and rainbows because that's not the case, man. Those animal rights activists are there and they're as well funded as ever. I guess what I'm trying to say though is I think there's a lot of younger people that are more favorable to trapping and hunting than we realize.
Right, right. And I would agree with that. We say, of course, we started out talking about the fur market and the fur, but we say all the time, if people that are 35 years old and younger, they don't even ask what fur prices are. They just want to go catch some animals, have some fun, maybe control some species on their hunting leases, and then they kind of get the bug, and then But yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to know that if they had that youth movement, like what appeared to be more in the 90s or whatever. That would be interesting to find out. And I don't know how necessarily how you would do that, but
yeah, I don't know what their like ranks are, if you will, or how many people are really involved in these organizations anymore. But that is a good point. Like, what are their rosters and their donations look? I mean, I have no idea. But I can remember as a kid, right, the late 80s and in the early 90s. I mean, and Charlie, I'm sure you remember this, like Fur Free Friday was a thing. Red paint was getting dumped on fur coats and all this kind of craziness. I don't really hear about that anymore.
Right. Right.
Maybe I'm living under a rock. I don't know, but fur prices on the other hand,
overseas or something. I'm not seeing it. I mean, the only little bit of backlash that we get sometimes just in the comment section is someone overseas that might not just understand, but for the most part, just like, yeah, I don't know if they have that kind of momentum anymore with the youth.
As you said, the animal rights movement is alive and well. And this is hardly it's just an observation from public comment hearings that we had here in Indiana, whether you were opposed to a season or against it. Those opposed to what we were in favor of were generally older people. I mean, older women, and they've probably kind of been on that page most of their life. There were a few younger people there that would kind of get fired up, but in general, I would say it was middle-aged to older individuals, and mostly women. And I don't mean to sound stereotypical, but that was just my observation at those public comment hearings. So there was, like I said, there were some younger people there, and a couple of them got kind of fired up. But overall, there wasn't a bunch of them. So
one of the things that I think is interesting too is when you look at like the fur. I mean, we talk about fur nowadays, and it's a tough market, selling on to the auctions or the big buyers and such. But I think it's kind of encouraging too to go to some of these smaller estate sales and such and see the number of craft buyers that are coming in.
Right.
And they may not buy 1,000 raccoons, but they might buy 50 or whatever, and they're usually paying a pretty good price. I know last year, for example, on my fur, I sold, and I didn't have a bunch of them, but you know what? I put up some possums because I knew craft buyer was coming, and I averaged $5 on possums. I averaged more on my possums last year at that sale than I did on my raccoons, which is insane. But that's all because there was a craft buyer there that wanted them.
Sure. And we have the same thing here too. If those craft buyers are, like you said, they're not buying thousands of skins. I guess in the scheme of things, you spread it out across the country, they are. And at our local sale, our 7B sale, they are an important part of that sale because they'll pick up some of the slack or even drive the market on some of that stuff. So yeah, I'm clearly on possums, but yeah. So
Yeah, and I'm not trying to publicly tell everybody to go out and put up 1,000 possums this year because you're going to average $5 on them. But
Yeah.
you know what? I'm kind of old school, and I hate to waste an animal. And you know what? If it's I'll put them up. They're not that hard to put up, actually.
No, they're
I
not.
put them. I slide them over a wire stretcher, and I'm done with it. When I'm done skinning them. But which I think you look at a possum. It's kind of too bad. Sometimes I wonder why that fur hasn't taken off. I actually think it's kind of a nice fur.
It is. I agree. It is.
Especially when you get like in the possum world, a nice possum. They're pretty. We've had some big ones come in. I can remember that even came through the sale that we throw down in Columbus. That's it's like, man, I wish I had that possum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You got any last things you want to say, Cameron?
I mean, we could go down all kinds of different roads here, I suppose.
oh yeah,
We'll have to do this again in the future. So
Yeah.
So it was
Oh yeah, I don't mind talking and sharing and honestly just visiting. I mean, I was honored that you guys asked me to come on to talk about the National Trappers Foundation a little bit and I will say, right, for folks that may be listening, you'll hopefully see me out on the road here at some of these conventions that I mentioned and such. I'll be around and certainly come up and talk to me or you can get on social media and we're trying to stay fairly active with the NTF Facebook page, et cetera, right? And so my contact information is there too, and you can reach out to me if your state is interested in doing something with the NTF, whether it's a banquet or just having me come to a convention, right, and do something. Always willing to help people. I've had a couple of state guys have called me and just have asked, or from a couple of different states, I should say, and they've it's just been an informal conversation with, hey, how in the world would we even start going about asking for a grant? And I mean, one guy in particular, a couple of weeks ago, I mean, he had no idea, right? And there's nothing against the guy. He just and through a 20-minute conversation, I gave him some ideas about maybe talking with some college students, et cetera, to try and build kind of a research project and get it going. And always free to or always happy to do that with someone as well. To try and help them if they can ultimately get like I said, put forward work on fur bearers and trapping and such. Always happy to do that.
Mhm.
And yeah, I like I said, there's all kinds of avenues we could have talked about. We talked trapping and military and NTF today. I do a lot of fly fishing and such too, so I got plenty of things to keep me busy out there. Chasing dogs. I still do a little coon hunting and I guess squirrel dogs and stuff now. So I got plenty of stuff to keep me busy and always happy to talk about those things.
Okay, cool.
yeah. Do you know the website right off the top of your head that they could, if they want to learn a little bit more? Or
National, I should have it memorized. It's www.nationaltrappersfoundation.com.
okay,
And you have a Facebook page, National Trappers Foundation.
Absolutely.
Are you on
Absolutely.
Instagram as well, or
Just Facebook.
Okay.
I should I should get better at doing all social. I mean, I probably
It's
should
so
be doing
hard.
TikTok videos, but
There's TikTok, Instagram. It's just there's more apps every day. It seems like I don't know how. Where's the stopping point?
yeah,
Where can we just? All right, this is where we can just call
well,
it good enough.
that's one of the things I tried to do with the NTF was get the Facebook page more active. So I told people, I said that's really how you're going to reach people nowadays.
it is.
I mean, it just is, right? It's whether we like it or not. That's where people are going for information. I
Yeah.
remember many years, 20, 25 years ago, in the earlier days of the internet, kind of the forums were kind of a big deal. But nowadays it's more social media. You got to get on Facebook and such. So it's free advertising to get on there. So that's why I try and put stuff out on that NTF Facebook page, et cetera, to show what we're doing, where we're going to be. Um, and as you mentioned, right? I mean, there's sky's the limit. Like I'm using Facebook. I should probably be using TikTok and some of these other ones, but give me time and I guess I'll figure out how to use those. And
Yeah.
I will say, Cameron, if you think about it when you are making posts or whatnot, feel free to share to a page that we started called the Catch Circle.
Okay.
It's all for trappers. I don't know how many thousands are on there now. It's got a decent following on there, but that's when I started. So, we don't really have rules as long as it's trapping related. As long as everyone's being nice to each other, it's fine. Whether
Yeah,
it's
good.
somebody selling a product or, all of them have rules. Just because we're Hoosier Trapper doesn't mean other suppliers can be on you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
especially someone with what you're working with, obviously is always welcome. So,
Oh, good. Yeah, no, that's good to know because I will take advantage of that.
yeah. All right. Well, thanks again for jumping on with us. And for everyone out there listening, please like, share, subscribe, help us grow, and get ready for season.
Yep. Coming up.
So.
Thank you, Cameron.
Yep, thank you.